Hey everybody, welcome back to Dad Talk today, and welcome to the Family Court Jungle. I've always wanted to say that. I'm joined with Melissa, and tonight we got Richard Fortus, guitarist of the legendary band Guns N' Roses. Looking so forward to that. And we have his beautiful wife, Stephanie Fortus. Stephanie, I hear you know a thing or two about family law.
I do know a thing or two about family law. I've practiced family law in St. Louis, Missouri for the past 20 years. So
how did you find yourself getting into family law?
My family. I went to work for my father when I got out of law school. And my father did a lot of criminal defense and he did a lot of divorce work. And so that's what I started out doing. And he taught me those fields. And that's what I continued with.
That is awesome.
So Stephanie, as far as your experience in family law, can you give us a quick rundown of your perception of family laws and if they need to change, how they need to change?
Sure. So like I said, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm at a law firm out here. And when I started practicing law 20 years ago, it was common. The default was that mothers would get children in separations, and fathers would get every other weekend from Friday to Sunday, and maybe a dinner or an overnight during the week. And that's how it started. And we didn't question it. That's how the default position was for the courts. And then I remember clearly when the court started going from every other weekend from Friday to Sunday to every other weekend from Friday to Monday. And we thought that was a big change. So maybe about 10 or more years ago, there started to be, and it happened pretty quickly in Missouri, that there was this shift from every other weekend that then dads would go for more of a 50-50 custody split. And it's funny because I remember my father, who is now, he just turned 87 years old. So he's sort of old school. And I remember my father coming to me pretty upset with that change and thinking, kids aren't going to want to go back and forth between households that frequently. And when we do that, we treat children like chattel. And it just turned out that that's just not true. In fact, children benefit from equal time from their parents. And now the law in Missouri has shifted so much that it is that the courts have to start off with the proposition that equal time is in the children's best interest. And if you want to deviate from that, then the burden is on you to show why that's not in the child's best interest. So I think that really has benefited children. It's benefited families. And that's, it's a difficult burden to overcome in the courts that I practice in. And I think that, that's what Richard's experience was with his case, is that I think fathers especially start off, they come in with the idea that they're not going to see their children. They're scared to death at that idea. And then I'm able to tell them from the start that we start off with the idea that 50-50 in Missouri is in the children's best interest.
That's amazing. And you're right. The shift happened very quickly because I know I started practicing over a decade ago and people looked at me like I had an eye in the middle of my forehead when I was talking about 50-50 and shared parenting. So that's been my experience as well. You're dead on. So Rich, you're this celebrity, you've done so much. You're sort of, you've been there, done that. And then you hit family court. So just to the extent you're comfortable with, just tell us your experience you had with family court.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. The idea of seeing my kids maybe once, like Steph was talking about, I mean, that was initially my belief of what the system was still, that, I looking at one weekends, maybe, that was terrifying to me. Because my kids were so important to me, or are so important to me. It was terrifying. And the idea of, I tell Steph when we drive by the court building, I'm like, every time I come by here, I get a knot in my stomach because in my case, turned out great. Like, I couldn't have dreamed of a better scenario than how mine turned out. The system really worked for me, and I found it to be very fair, and I was very fortunate. And when we drive by there, still, it makes me feel sick, because I remember walking into that building and thinking my whole life is going to change. Like, this is going to determine the rest of my life. And it's such a tremendous feeling to fear to walk in there and know that you're gonna forever be affected by this day.
Yeah, and I think I hear it a lot, Stephanie. I'm sure you do too. Is it's always better to settle. Both parents have input everything, because the clients will tell me that it's so nerve-wracking walking into court, because all the decisions about your children, your money, everything is completely taken out of your hands. It's put into the hands of a stranger. So I think you're exactly right. That feeling of uncertainty, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, is prevalent, and I think a lot of guys feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. They must.
Absolutely. So, Rich, I mean, what was that like? You said, it was scary knowing that you was walking in there and you didn't know how it was going to come out. But I mean, leading up to that, what was some of the emotions going on, knowing that, hey, I'm a father and I can't, I mean, what was that whole process like?
In my mind, I had a lot going against me, because I'm gone so much of the time.
Right.
So how is a judge going to look at that and think, well, sure, it was was really terrifying to me. And, it just, like I said, things just worked out really well. And I was just very fortunate. At the same time, my kids' mom made she made some bad decisions, I guess, and that, and fortunately for me, the system recognized that and saw it, and the judge I found was very fair, and and that's my situation turned out well.
Gotcha, man.
And I have to say, in custody cases, the other thing that I find that parents are afraid of is the other parent either making bad allegations against their partner, or they've made bad decisions themselves. And I try to tell everybody that the courts here in St. Louis and here in Missouri, they don't require perfect parents. They are very realistic that people are going to make mistakes. And people, it's not going to be, we're not going to have a custody battle over who feeds their child hot dogs and who feeds their child organic vegetables, which is a big, people say, oh, they don't feed them properly, and courts just don't require perfect parents. And I think that that's important for parents to know. What they do require is for parents to show that they are making decisions based on the children's best interest. Right. And sometimes that's difficult to do when you're in the middle of a breakup or you're in the middle of a divorce. You're scared about not having enough money to find someplace to live. You're scared about having to, go through and change everything for your kids. And you do make decisions a lot of times that, looking back, you think, well, that wasn't very smart. But courts also, judges are parents, lawyers are parents, and we all know that it's very, it's hard to be perfect. We do our best, we try, but sometimes looking back, we think, oh my God, what was I thinking? So, right. I think it's important to know that just because there's been mistakes made in the past, it's not going to keep you from having your kids.
Yeah.
I always kept forefront in my mind, going through that whole tumultuous time, that paramount to me was being and remembering that to do the right thing for my kids, to not look at the little things and not be petty, and to really just really try and do the right thing that I know that I could look back on and not regret.
Absolutely. And I know me and you have had that talk a lot of times, Melissa, about some of the petty things that parents fuss about. What's some of the crazy petty things that you've heard, Stephanie?
Man, it doesn't stop. I mean, I've gone round and round on who's gonna get the Christmas tree topper.
Oh,
You know, I mean, I did one time, I did a, who's gonna get the antique grandfather's shaver, you know? And I mean, it's just, at that point you have to stop and you have to say, is this what you want to spend your attorney's fees on? But then people do pretty terrible things to their kids. I mean, they make decisions, like, for example, about exchanging custody. Children don't want to have to exchange custody at the police department. People don't want to, children really don't want to hear, they don't want their parent to sit them down and tell them every bad thing that the other parent has ever done.
Right.
And so, we laugh about the Christmas tree topper, but there's a more insidious part of divorce law, which is, parental alienation versus parental estrangement. So parental alienation, I think we all know, the term is when the other parent is telling the child things to alienate that child from the parent. Your parent is so bad because of this, and this. They don't love you. But there's also an insidious part of family law, which is parental estrangement, and that is when the one parent is behaving so badly that bad behavior is affecting that child. And it puts the other parent in a spot where that other parent is saying, listen, I've got to advocate for my kid. I'm not alienating my child from their parent. That other parent's behavior is so bad that's why the child doesn't want to go with mom or dad. Oh, do you see what I mean? So that child's parent, the other parent, is doing things and acting so badly that the parent feels like, I have to protect my child from this. So we get back, we get into a situation of what is alienation and what is estrangement. Where does that line, where are we crossing the line of the parent acting badly? And that's what's causing, the child to not want to be around them. But in St. Louis County, in Jefferson County, in St. Charles County, where I practice, the courts are really good about saying, let's get them into counseling. Let's get these families into therapy and into counseling, and let's let the counselor find out what's going on. The courts aren't taking the position here that they're the experts in what's going on. So that's a nice, that's really nice that we have judges that are willing to say, all right, let's put these kids in therapy and see if the therapist can figure out what's going on.
You had brought up allegations going back and forth. I know a lot of my dads that I represent, they're afraid of being falsely accused of molestation or of abuse or domestic violence. It's something that it permeates, I think, most men when they go through the family court system. So how have you found the courts deal with these allegations? Because a lot of times judges will err on the side of caution and they'll enter these orders that stop all contact or that have these dads undergo evaluations with biased counselors and biased evaluators. So what's your experience been in that area?
My experience has been that, it's fact specific. And a lot of times we know what the very serious allegations are versus the ones that don't pass the smell test. Mm-hmm. And so really the courts here are good about, if there's allegations of physical abuse or sexual abuse, I think you're right. I think that the courts instantly say, listen, this is not, I can't risk putting a child in this situation. But in our jurisdiction, they will appoint a guardian ad litem right away. And they will, send the kid to counseling or conduct their investigation. And really, I have found that the courts are open to, they either will take the position, this may have happened and we really have to treat this seriously, or I don't think that this did happen. So, it's, in my experience, it's been very fair. The problem with it is children have to go through a lot when their parent makes that kind of an allegation. And the courts also know that we don't want to put children in that position if we don't have to. But the courts also say, you know, what are we supposed to do if there are these really serious allegations? We have to look into them. But I have found that the truth comes out in the end. And that's been my experience, is that, you know, the truth does prevail.
That's good. It's good to hear that in your jurisdiction that you believe the truth usually does prevail, because I know there's a lot of innocent men sitting in prison right now because in the end the truth didn't prevail. And that could be because they had an attorney who sold them out, an attorney who refused to fight for them. And I know there's men that are discouraged from engaging in litigation. Rich, you made a comment. You said, you know, I'm gone so much. Is that going to be used against me? You know, I have a lot of clients who are truck drivers or who are offshore workers, and they come here because they say, I went to another attorney and they told me, look, you don't have a chance because of how much you were gone. So I think a lot of it is credit to you then as well, is that you're doing the right thing and you're litigating and not just taking money and telling these guys, hey, you know, you need to settle for every other weekend, because I know that happens. So Rich, the fact that you were gone so much, was that a concern for your attorney at the time, you know, that just you being traveling so much?
I don't remember my attorney ever bringing that up and saying, well, actually, yeah, we did discuss it. And it was a concern for both of us, but we just stayed focused on, you know, what we were focused on, and let things, you know, I always tried to be as open and honest as possible going through the whole experience.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and I have to say, Richard is a gentleman, you know, and that is, a lot of times people can be their own worst enemies in these custody cases and divorce cases. You know, they can really lose focus and lash out against the other parent. And Richard is just, I mean, he really is a gentleman. He puts his kids first. He puts their mother, you know, we really do our best to be friendly, you know, to build each other up. And that's what will help everybody in their custody case. If you can kind of learn to take a deep breath and put the kids first, set aside your differences, it really does make all the difference in the world in a custody case.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. You know, you got these certain lawyers that get those false allegations or anything going to get the mudslinging going back and forth, and then they're no longer parents. They become bitter enemies. And these are two people that came together and make it a child. And that's my problem with this system. I'm glad to hear that about St. Louis, and I'm hoping Georgia. I live in one of the worst states for that, because it don't happen here. I mean, it becomes a mudslinging battle, and it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be, you know, kids for paychecks. We should be able to just get along. And the false allegation thing has just gotten ridiculous. I know everybody's seen what went on with Johnny Depp here lately with Amber Heard. I mean, we found out it was the other way around. How do you guys feel about the consequences of somebody making these false allegations? I don't think they're severe enough myself.
It worked out for me.
Did it work out for you?
Yeah, because I think people see, you know, as long as you remain gracious, they see that you're coming from the right place. Like I said, I never would speak poorly. I would never do anything like that. And I think that the judge saw that. I think her attorney saw it. I think, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it ended up, for me, to be very fair.
They could see through to what was really going on.
Yes, and they recognized it.
You don't have to stoop to that lower level.
You don't, and I think that's like Steph was saying, that's the mistake a lot of people make.
I will be honest with you, though, a lot of them don't catch it. You know, some of them are so convincing. I mean, I just had the actor on the show not long ago. He was facing life in prison, guys, and he got out, and he did 6 months in prison, and he got out, but it's like that. It shouldn't be so easy for somebody to just make those false allegations, you know?
Yeah. And Rich, it's good to have you on because you're a success story. And I think
right.
a lot of the guys who follow this podcast, and we have second wives, a lot of mothers, sisters follow the podcast, is what you spoke to earlier, that fear of the unknown, because you hear the horror stories about family court. And some dads get stereotyped, or they're fighting allegations where it no longer is about the kids. It's now about fighting these allegations. And you get wrapped up in that, and I think a lot of men give up. So at what point, you said you had so much fear going into this, and you stayed the course, did the right thing. What motivated you to stay in the game and fight the fight for your kids? How did fear not overtake you?
Because of my kids were paramount. I mean, my relationship with my children was more important than anything. So that was always, it was never a question. I had to fight for them. I mean, I had to keep doing what I was doing, but that fear didn't stop even after court, even after for quite a bit of time, because I was afraid, of so many things. You're afraid, well, is this going to come back somehow? It's a terrifying experience all around.
Yeah. And people have to remember that kids aren't little forever, and they grow up, and they start to see the truth, and they start to see, both sides of a situation. I work with a lawyer whose grandfather was estranged from them, and his mom always said, your grandfather, my dad, never wanted anything to do with me. He never supported me. And so this lawyer ended up moving to St. Louis and taking care of his grandfather, and went into the attic or the basement one day to look through some boxes and found all the canceled checks for child support.
Oh, wow.
And called his mom and said, you weren't, I don't think that they told you the truth, because he'd paid child support this whole time. And I think that happens, it does happen, I think, less frequently now with internet, and with, you can learn these things easier. But I do think that, like I say, the truth will prevail, and maybe it prevails years later, but kids aren't kids forever. And kids grow up, and they have their own sense of values, and they really want a relationship with both mom and dad. There could be a situation where they want an arm's length relationship with one parent or the other. But my advice would be, if you're in a situation where there has been parental alienation, or where there has been, allegations made against you, my advice to that parent is stay the course. If you text your child and say, I love you so much. And if they don't answer back, they just don't answer back. But you're always the parent, and you don't step away, because that's been, you send Christmas cards and gifts and birthday, and tell your child how much you love them, regardless of whether or not that child you think is receptive to that at the time. Because we have a lot, with teenagers, and, they'll say, I don't want anything to do with my dad for this reason, this reason, and this reason. And I tell the parents, that doesn't matter. You text them this morning, and you tell them how important they are to you. And that will come back.
You're absolutely right. We lose a lot of dads to suicide who are wrapped up in family court, because they lose hope, and it just, the fear of everything it overtakes them, and they don't feel anyone's fighting for them. They don't feel the system is fair. You make a very good point. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. These kids are not going to stay little forever. And there's been success stories after the fact where children grow up and then they learn the truth. So, you guys watching who are stuck in this rut, we have a success story right here.
Right.
And your kids they're not going to be little forever. They are not. And they might come with questions, and there is a time to answer questions, and there's a time not to disclose information. So, you don't want to, like what they're saying, they don't talk bad about, Rich's ex-wife, the children's mother. They did the right thing. And down the road, when your children ask you questions down the road, there's a time and place, but stay the course. Now's the time to stay the course.
That's right.
And it's
And-
hard. It's hard when you know that their kids are hearing something absolutely untrue, and your instinct is to want to defend yourself. But you've got to stay. You've got to keep, because kids know that they're half their mom and they're half their dad.
They do.
And if you're telling them half of you is bad, it doesn't work out. It does not work, and the truth always will come out. I mean,
the other problem that I see a lot of times is men will bring new women into relationships, or vice versa, will bring new men into relationships, and they will allow that new person to really take on the anger and take on the cause of that spouse. And my advice would be, when you're in a situation and you have a new relationship or a new wife or anything, that person really be encouraged to embrace the other parent and do what they can to keep the peace. I mean, there's no reason that the new spouse should be taking up their spouse's cause. I mean, we're all adults, and parents should be encouraged to tell their new partner that, my kids come first, and I don't want you to think that you have to defend me. Let's just all, the more that the parents and the new relationships and the new spouses can get along, the better that the kids are going to do, because kids don't really want to be involved in their parents' relationships or their parents' drama. Kids they want to be kids. They want to feel safe and know that they've got school to go to and that their parents love them. And so if everybody can kind of keep focused on that, it would be helpful also.
Absolutely.
It's hard. I mean, it is, especially coming out of a divorce or a breakup, and then you had high conflict there. Then you go to family court, and then that high conflict doesn't go anywhere. Somewhere you got to break the cycle. I had a parent that came to me not long ago. Was like, my ex, he just won't talk to me. He's been alienating me from the kids. We can't do anything. And I sat down, and she was like, what do I do? And I was like, go tell him. Let's go meet in a neutral place. You pick the place. Let's sit down. No lawyers. Let's just talk. He'll never go for that. He'll never go for that. They did. And 50-50 is going on right now. All it took was somebody to say, I'll give you a little bit of room to show you I'm not your enemy here. I want to do this with you.
That's right.
Family court don't do that.
And you know what? There's never too many people to love a kid.
That's right.
A child can never be loved by too many people.
That's right. And that's the sad thing about alienation. Parents are the ones that people think of when alienation is going down, but you got the whole other side of the family. I've been alienated for 2 years. My whole family hasn't seen my child.
Oh, that's a shame. I'm sorry.
And that's, I wish the courts would recognize that a little bit more, but that's curious that you was talking about. I want you to go a little bit deeper into that, the difference between parental alienation and estrangement, if you would, Stephanie.
Sure. So parental alienation is when, let's just use in this example, mom, because I think it'll just make it clearer. So mom is talking to the kids about how horrible their father is, about all the bad things that their father has done, telling the child all these negative things about dad, and essentially moving that child over to mom's position.
Right.
And, you need to tell the guardian ad litem all these horrible things that dad has done to you. And it alienates that child from their father. Yeah. There's also parental estrangement, which is, let's say in this situation, father really is a bad guy. Father won't pick up the child when he says he's going to. Father is abusive in some way, either emotionally or physically, or they are using drugs, or they're not doing something that they're supposed to be doing, and the child doesn't feel safe with the father. Mom then goes to the courts and they say, my child's not safe with their dad. My child tells me that dad is doing this, this, and this. Right. And a lot of times the courts will say, well, is mom alienating? Is this alienation of parental alienation? Or is this dad is really acting badly? And so, courts have a difficult time to try to figure out what's going on. And a lot of times in the courts here, we will appoint guardians ad litem, and they will be able to talk to both sides and talk to the kids to find out what is actually happening. Is dad the bad actor, or is mom, the bad actor by alienating the kid? And that's a tough thing for a court to decide. So, we really have to get therapists involved and get guardians ad litem involved and encourage children to say, both of your parents love you. What's going on here?
So there was a reason I got you to say that again, is a lot of people say that parental alienation isn't in the DSM-5, but then others say, yes, it is. It's under estrangement. And that's why I love you clarifying that, because it's two separate things.
Of abuse.
Right.
So yeah, when courts believe that there's been alienation, they will take that child from that parent and give them to the other parent.
Good. Awesome. Well, I tell you what, thank you two so much for coming on today and talking about this. And I can't thank you enough. I'm curious, how did the two of you meet? This is an interesting dynamic here. The rock star with the family lawyer.
A mutual friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was sitting in my place on a Saturday night. I was in my pajamas, and I got a friend request, and I looked at it, and it said he's the guitarist for Guns N' Roses. So I figured it was a scam, and I didn't accept the friend request. And I didn't even think about it. I went on with my night, and I got a text an hour or so later from our mutual friend who said, we're setting you up with this guy. He's going to send you a friend request. Don't be an asshole and delete him, because he really is the guitarist for Guns N' Roses. And I said, I already did it. I already deleted him. And so he sent me a friend request, and I accepted it, and we talked, and it's been great ever since.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Rich, what's going on with the tour? Do you guys know when you're going to be able to start back up?
No, nobody knows, but we're hoping for next summer.
Next summer?
Mm-hmm. For next summer, and I think we start in Europe.
Let's hope everything gets back. I know that we're all anxious to get back to normal.
Oh yeah, definitely, everybody.
Absolutely. And how long have you been in Guns, Rich? It's 18 years now, right?
18 years, yeah.
What's that experience been like?
It beats working.
Yeah. Definitely, man. Well, I tell you what, dude, that's the music of my childhood. I love it. It's one of my favorite bands of all time. Again, it was such an honor to be able to talk to both of you. And I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. To the extent that this is considered an advertisement, which I don't know that it is, the Bar Association will have me say that anytime you want to choose a lawyer, it shouldn't be based on any advertisement. And what your listeners should know is, when you're going to get a lawyer, it shouldn't be based on advertisement. I encourage people to talk to their lawyer, and you will see by talking to them who you like and who you think that you can connect with and who you think that you don't mind hearing the truth from. Yeah. So there's a lot of decisions to be made when you're looking for a lawyer. And so, don't be afraid to talk to a few of them and see who you like and who you think that you trust.
Well, Stephanie, you bring up a really good point, because we live in the age of information, and now anybody can go and put Google reviews. That might not necessarily be the person you want to read that review from. Having a conversation like we are now is a lost thing, I believe, in society. You really need to know the lawyer before you pick them, and not just trust some blurb on the Google reviews.
And you need to add some of the information that, like, Stephanie's putting out here, because you'd be shocked how many family law attorneys couldn't tell you a definition for parental alienation or parental estrangement, and will tell us, dads, even now, that, look, it's going to be an upward battle, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars, and you want to be careful the ones who make promises to you. So, but absolutely, like Stephanie said, have the conversation, ask the questions, and go with your gut, really.
That's right.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you again so much, and hopefully we'll see you again later on down the road.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are fighting for the rights of parents worldwide. If you want to help support our podcast and for us to continue this mission, please join us at patreon.com/dadtalktoday. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, CloutHub, Parler, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, the podcast app. Google, Apple Podcasts. We're a little bit of everywhere. And guys, every time you like and subscribe, you help us continue this mission. Thank you, and we will see you next time.